from the previous speaker.
Risk of being shot, vegetables or fruit for the sick. Even when a typhoid epidemic swept through the camp, he would walk among the dying, unafraid of infection, reciting with the patients the confessional. He was able to bring news from the outside world to us, always promising the defeat of our tormentors and eventual arrival of redemption. The wagons were shut up tight, and we tried to assess our new habitat. There was hardly any room to move around, so we expected a short journey. It was not to be, and we couldn't even determine the direction in which we were traveling. When night fell, we were already exhausted from standing in the heat. Everyone tried to find a place to lay down, but there was no room for 120 people to do so. The tired men were irritable and fights were breaking out. Someone suggested sitting down between each other's legs, and in this way we settled as best as we could for the night. There were no sanitary facilities, so with our fingers and spoons, knives were forbidden to own, we had to tear a hole in the floor. Next morning we expected to stop and to be fed, or at least to be given some water. The train slowed down several times for the convenience of the SS guards, but there was no relief for the prisoners. The heat of the August sun started to take its toll. No men were fainting, and cries for water punctuated the air, what air there was. The cattle cars had 4 small steel-barred windows, one in each corner, hardly enough to provide ventilation. Desperate men were licking the salty condensation from the walls. At our end of the car, we designed a system of rotation so that each one could, at least for a brief period of time, stand by the window to revive himself. The second night was chaotic. Hopeless, despondent men directed their frustrations at each other. 2 men took poison, and the corpses were propped against the wall so as to take up less space. The 3rd day of our voyage took us through German countryside where we could see people working in the fields, but no one paid heed to our anguished cries. The thirst and stench, the heat and lack of air were becoming unbearable. Our lips were parched and our spirits totally deflated. That afternoon, the train stopped at the railroad station of a larger town. Wehrmacht and SS troops were patrolling the station, and we also saw some nurses. Feverish pleas of Wasser, Wasser, water, water could be heard from all 24 cattle cars. Fate so willed that at our end of the car, it was Reb Meyer Katz's turn to stand at the window facing the station. Miraculously, one of the nurses heeded Reb Meyer's plea and handed him a bottle of water. The men in the wagon all surged toward Reb Meyer. Before he could drink from the bottle to quench his torturous thirst, he turned slowly toward the inside of the cattle car, considering the unruly mob for a moment while still holding the bottle outside the window. Then, without as much as bringing the bottle close to his face, he moved it to the mouth of the man next to him, and in his caring voice implored him, "Drink, drink, mein Kind. No a klein bissel. Take only a little sip, my child." And then he went on to the next person, and so on. As if mesmerized, the men stopped pushing. Those close by obediently took one swallow or two. Even when the bottle was empty, it was still being passed around. Human dignity and sanity slowly returned. As if by miracle, there were no complaints, only weeping and sobbing. We hung our heads in shame for our animalism and also in quiet tribute to Reb Meyer's personal restraint and sacrifice. We arrived at the Konzentrationslager Flossenburg 24 hours later. The 4 days and 3 nights in the cattle cars seemed like a lifetime. A descent into Dantean depths, ending in the victorious ascent back into man's dignity. All of our victory, the result of Reb Meyer's limitless love of his God, expressed by his caring for his fellow man. Was Reb Meyer Katz one of the 36 legendary saintly men whose righteous deeds sustained the universe? His blessed soul was extinguished in the winter of 1944 in the Flossenburg concentration camp. But the memory of him, of his faith and his piety, served me as a beacon of hope in the then hopeless world and saw me through the abyss of despair. God's rays of hope, he showed me, shining through the midnight of mankind. Thank you for listening. I hope we have time to open up for questions and answers.
Do you want to show the...
I have to turn around because I can see no. I have no eyes in the back of my head.
Okay. Will you flash the first picture? Those from Atlanta. Oh, you need to get rid of
This is, obviously, this is a map of the whole world with the star of Atlanta and Poland. Go to the next one. This, Poland is the center middle of Europe. Come on. This is where the city of my hometown, Krakow, was located in southwestern corner of Poland. There's a picture of my parents, my mother and my father, taken in 1919 before they were married. My father was still serving in the Polish army, and my mother, as you see, was a beautiful, educated lady. She spoke 6 languages. In my house, there were books in German by Heine Goethe Schumann, books by Voltaire in French, by Shakespeare in English. She spoke a language probably none of you are familiar with. It's called Esperanto. After World War I, people of goodwill decided that the reason we had such a terrible war as World War I was that everybody spoke different languages. So they created a new language, Esperanto, which was a mixture of Spanish, German, English, and other languages. And they felt that if everybody speaks one common language, there will be no wars anymore. So my mother graduated. She proudly wore a button saying that she graduated as a student of Esperanto. This is my fourth grade class. There are 42 students here. Out of the 42, only 6 of us survived. This was taken in 1941 in a small community where we lived, the village of Zawiel on the bank of the Vistula River. The 4 fellows on both sides of me were students in the agriculture vocational school. They were all children of rather well-to-do Polish peasants who sent their sons to this agriculture school. All 4 of them were members of the underground. The fellow to the left of me, by name of Izek Kowalski, he, in 1942, when things were getting really gruesome, with children being shot, killed, and so on, he said to me, "Why don't you give me your brother?" Who was at that time 10 years old, 9 years old. and hiding on our farm. We have other children of workers that work over there. And from the picture that you have, he doesn't look Jewish, and he told me he speaks Polish well. You know, when he conspicuous, he can survive on the farm. So I went to my father, and I said, Dad, this is what Yusek offered. What do you think? She said, it's okay with me, but God is Mom. So I went to my mother, and she says, thank you, but no thank you. Tell Yusek she would not separate herself from a child. 2 months later, she walked with him to the gas chambers in Belgium.